Hey, hello everyone. My name is Philip Lister. I'm the guy who has the 1972 Pontiac Lemans GT, now a GTO clone that's for sale on eBay and Craigslist. And there's been a lot of questions about the car. Actually, I've been overwhelmed with how many questions there have been about the car, detailed questions. And I thought it may be best if I shot a more comprehensive video doing a walk around on the car and actually driving the car. So let's go ahead and do that. So as I mentioned, this car to me is a project, still got some work to be done. I'll talk about some of those in more detail later, but I think I've described the history of the car well enough. But I just want to walk around and point out some of the things I think are flaws or suspect things about the car, which you may notice if you were here actually looking at it yourself. So this paint, has 5 coats of clear. It's original GM Covert 1050 paint code. It was Brittany beige on the sticker that came on the car, but this is the original color, original exterior color, original interior color. And there's a few runs. There's probably about maybe half dozen small runs I think need to be wet sanded and buffed back out, and I think the paint would be near perfect, but that's just some work that needs to be done. I tried to take a picture of those, but those are so small I really have not been able to take really good pictures that actually show the runs. So anyway, I want you to be aware of those. There have been a lot of questions about the wheels on the car. These are not the original Rally 2s, obviously. These are year one 17-inch one-piece machined aluminum wheels. 17/8s on the front, 17/9s on the rear. Got a brand new set of these are 215/55s on the front, 255/50/17s on the rear. The tires probably have maybe 25 miles on them. Again, this has been a weekend driver, and I think I have probably only driven the car about maybe 2,000 miles, if that, in the 7 years I've actually had the car. So one of the things on the car, the passenger side mirror is a little loose. It just needs to be tightened up. You're going to need to go inside from the inside, take off the door panel, and fix that. The doors shut nice and tight. All of them do. The interior issues. One of the things on the dash. This is a dash cap. There's a place right here where there's a bit of an indentation because the original dash had a big gash in it. And so when I glued this dash back down, even though I put a filler, it still has a bit of an indentation. If you look closely, you'll notice there's little places like on the steering column. As I mentioned, the headliner and the package tray, as you can probably tell, these are the original. They're intact. There's no tears, but there's just some age. The headliner is starting to come unglued from its edges. I never even bothered to fix this because it was never that bad. And as I mentioned, all the door panels and seats and carpets and floor mats have all been replaced with factory colors, factory carpet, factory GM floor mats, and so on. All the window cranks work for all 4 windows. The seat belts work perfectly. There's seat belts for 4 in the car, and they're all in perfect working order. One thing about the dash, the glove box. The original glove box had a plastic hinge, and I think it was a design flaw for GM in the early 70s, and it was broken. Couldn't fix it, and so I went to Lowe's and bought a brass piano hinge, and I put that in. But the problem is it won't lay all the way flat, but it does work just fine. So all the controls work inside the car. That I cannot find anything that does not work. All the interior lights, such as that, all that works. Let's go around here to the trunk. As you probably noticed from some of the pictures I posted, it was actually sprayed with some GM factory splatter that went in trunks from these model years. Only thing really wrong is there's a bit of surface rust where just water ran down these channels, these gutters, puddled up here. It's just on the surface. That needs to be addressed. I've just never gotten around to it. The bumpers I mentioned has been painted the color of the car. It was originally chrome. All this has been dressed up with new grommets and whatnot. So all this is factory original equipment. But I painted the bumper back just because the original chrome was starting to pit a bit. So I just took it off, sanded it down really well, and painted it the color of the car. You can buy a refurbished bumper for about $350 shipped on eBay if you wanted to replace this with a chrome one. So I thought about it, just never got around to it. I thought I'd go ahead and go back with this monochrome look. Let's see what else. Again, doors and window cranks all work just fine. That one's a little squeaky just because it's tight, but it all works really well. I replaced this rubber on both sides, this window sill rubber, that's new. I left this rubber because it was all intact and in pretty good shape on both sides, and I replaced this rubber that goes around the door and for the window on both doors. So all that is new. So what else? Let's see. Here in the engine compartment, again, this was a Hatter 350, which I'll show you in a little bit. The original 350, which I still have. This is a 400 out of a 70 Pontiac Trans Am. I got it from a neighbor of mine who was rebuilding his TA. Has a Summit 650 CFM carburetor, MSD electronic ignitions, got a new battery. All the hoses and belts have been replaced. Summit vacuum canister. This is the one place where there's a bit of a radiator leak here. There's some coolant leak when it gets up to temperature. It's pretty minor. I've tightened these bolts down pretty well, but I'm sure it's just the gasket. I think about probably 5 or 6 years ago I replaced the thermostat, replaced the gasket, and the gasket probably needs to be replaced again. But it's not a very significant leak, so I really just haven't gotten around to it. So. Underneath the car, let's see if we can see that. There's no rust anywhere. This probably doesn't tell you much, but tell you what, I'll go ahead and show you what I can underneath the car from each side. There's been some questions about that. If you can tell, there's no rust in there. I think that's the original that did not garage the car the first years that they had. There's probably it's been garage. Tire exists. You can know here. There's no rust. See here. See there's no pan anywhere. Chat. Let me get the passenger side real quick. Passenger. Not sure if you can see this or not, but everything's pretty solid. All right, let's crank it up and go for a ride. That's about how it sounds when I crank it up cold. So you can see temperature gauge is, it's a cold motor. So I mentioned it's a bit cold natured. So it just takes a little, you gotta stay in the pedal just a little bit, actually it's running pretty well. All right. Take it around the block, let you guys see how it drives. Speedometer works. I don't think the clock works. I've never had to mess with it. All the idiot lights work to the best of my knowledge. I've never had an issue with any of them. The windshield wipers work. There's good wipers. I mentioned, I think in the listing, that all the brake lights, park lights, turn signals, all that works well. A couple of the headlights are out. But the car doesn't make any noise. It drives fine, shifts fine, brakes fine. I'm going downhill now. I think what I'll do is Just hit the brakes real hard here so you can see. I'm hitting the brakes. It's not pulling at all left or right. The car tracks real well. One of the issues I had was the power steering. I had some issues with it, and got the belts nice and tight. It was actually the steering. If I had made a hard left or a hard right, it would make the power steering pump would make a noise. It's really only because the power steering belt was slipping a bit, and wasn't doing its job like it should. So the power steering was under a bit of a strain. But again, you can see it accelerates really well, like you would expect for a 400 in a car this size. Hopefully you can hear that. Sounds pretty good to me. Alright, I'll pull it back in the driveway. I've got a couple of the extra pieces that I plan to ship with the car. The motor, hopefully whoever comes and gets it can also get the original 350. Anyway, that's what it. Oh, here's one thing. The on the door, the driver's side door, the Lemans logo is missing. There's a Lemans logo on this side, and I actually have this one, but I lost it somewhere along the way. It's never turned back up, but you can get those for a few bucks on year one. I really thought about putting GTO logos on there when I decided to make it a GTO clone, which is one of the reasons why I have not replaced that one. But I mean, there's some little things like, for example, there's little scuff marks here. This is the original door panel, so there's a little nick there. A small little, not a nick, but like a little imperfection there. So again, I think this car's not perfect. It's a project. I think still got some work to be done. There's places like this, like on the chrome. There's a couple like dings like this, but things that hopefully you would expect from a car from this age for the price point that I'm trying to get for this thing. But the body itself is really straight. There is some Bondo. Now don't be surprised by that. I mean, here's one place right here, the little place on the door. I don't even know how this happened, but I think when they brought it back over from the paint shop, I think the truck driver actually did that, because they said when it left the paint shop it wasn't like that. So, but I've got some spare paint that can be touched up with. So, but the body itself is really straight and nice and clean. There's a few places where if you look close enough, you're going to tell there's, probably some Bondo. It's not perfect. Again, I call it a project. Let me show you some of the extras that will actually go with the car. So here's the original jack and lug wrenches. Here's the original headlight bezel. This is the driver's side, and it's actually perfect. So it'll go right here. It fits perfectly nice and tight like it should. But here's the passenger side, and this was the original one. This was damaged in the wreck, and you can see it was broken right here. It's pretty straight. I mean, somebody who's pretty patient might be able to hammer this thing out and respray it and make it work, but they're not perfect, so I didn't put them back in. I do have the original, what's left of the original paint, probably about I don't know, this bucket's probably, gallon bucket's probably about 20% full, so I've got some of the original paint for doing touch-ups. This is the CD that came with the Summit 650 CFM carburetor. I think it's running a bit rich, but I've never bothered to actually even open up the CD. I bolted that thing on, plumbed it up, hooked it up, and it ran, so I pretty much I've left it. But I do think it needs to be addressed. Over here, this is my 64 Dodge Swept line, which is my next project. But here's the original 350 that was in the car when I got it. It's got the original manifold and a spare manifold. It actually has an aluminum manifold on it now. There's the original steering wheel, so the air conditioning will go with the car, and do one and so on. The next Well, I intend to let, I guess, the owner have all this stuff if they want it. Otherwise, it's just going to, the rest of this will go on Craigslist or something. So anyway, hopefully that answers most of your questions about the car. It was the best. Thank you. If not, hit watching, but I'll answer them as I can.